everybody, what you have in this video are my closing remarks, or you might say outro rant, to KMO Show episode number 6. The interview in that episode was with Dr. Ashley Frawley. It's a good interview. I think it's fun to listen to. I would encourage you to take in the whole thing, but the numbers don't lie. I know that a lot more people watch my solo monologues than will listen to an interview. I don't know why. I've been told I'm a good interviewer. But anyway, just so that more people hear it and I get those magical clicks, here is me just jabbering at the end of KMO Show episode number 6. That was Dr. Ashley Frawley, and the remaining half of our conversation will be in the next episode of the C-Realm Vault podcast. I believe that will be C-Realm Vault podcast episode number 453. And you can access it via my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/KMO. So I told you up front that I had a story to tell. The story is this. I live in Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, Tornado Alley. And I woke up to the civil alert sirens going off and also my smartphone telling me, take shelter. Get to the, either to a basement or to an interior room on the ground floor of a building and, sit tight. And my mother was born on this spot, not in this house, because the house she was born in was destroyed by a tornado in 1940. Her uncle was killed in that storm. She takes tornado safety very seriously. And I mostly grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, which is also in Tornado Alley. And when the tornado sirens would go off, my bedroom was on the second floor. And she would come and try to drag me out of bed and take me down to the basement. And I did not have my whole life destroyed by a tornado in my youth, and I just didn't take it seriously. Well, there was something about the vibe this morning that made me take it seriously, and we actually ended up, the two of us and my new dog, a puppy, but she's going to be a very big dog, so even as a 3-month-old puppy, she's 25 pounds. We took shelter in a closet in an interior hallway in this house that her father built. And our cat, Bitcoin, is not fond of the dog, and the dog likes the cat well enough, but she also likes to chase the cat. And the cat hisses at her and will swipe at her, ineffectually and half-heartedly. But the cat is afraid of thunder, and the cat ran and hid behind a couch in the living room. But then when we all gathered in this interior hallway, the cat joined us. And the cat was cheek by jowl with the dog and was not hissing, and the dog was not being a problem to the cat. Everybody just seemed to appreciate the gravity of the situation, and we all hunkered down together. Now, the cat didn't actually get into the closet with us, but I had a big cushion. I leaned the cushion against a wall in the hallway, and the cat got under the cushion right next to the closet with us. And we hung out there for about 20 minutes, waiting for the storm to pass, which it did. And obviously, I'm recording in this same house. It didn't get hit by a tornado. But when I went outside, I saw that our neighbor's place, we live next to a big academy house. It's a big 2-story building. It's white. It's got big columns out front. And that academy building used to be a 3-story building until the tornado that destroyed my mom's house when she was a child, it also hit that academy building and took off the 3rd floor, the 3rd story. And when they rebuilt, they just put the roof on the 2nd story. So it used to be a 3-story building. It's now a 2-story building because of a tornado. And I went out and I looked out into the yard around the academy house, and I saw that some canoes that the neighbor had pressed up against the fence were way out in the middle of this sprawling lawn. And one of those canoes, which had been dragged several hundred yards by the wind, had a cinder block chained to it. So this was no joke. We didn't get hit by a tornado, but it was no joke. And the animals really know what's what, when it comes to whether or not to take a threat like this seriously, because they did not hesitate. And, this puppy, being a puppy, she's not trained. She doesn't come when she's called. She doesn't do what she's told. But when we all went into hiding, she went into hiding with us, along with the cat. All right. So those of you who are longtime listeners of the C-Realm podcast, which was my first podcast and one that I did for 17 years, something like that, I have a policy. And my policy is this. Once a guest has left the room, once the recorded interview is over and here I am in these closing remarks, I never add anything new. If the guest and I debated on something or if we disagreed on something, I never use this time at the end to get in the last word, to score points against an opponent who has left the stage and is no longer able to respond to them. So that is just my policy, point blank, period, almost no exceptions. And there will certainly be no exception to that policy in this episode. And in fact, if you go and you listen to the second half, the one that will be on the C-Realm Vault podcast, we don't argue there either. And it's mostly because I don't know Ashley that well. I don't know her positions that well. And in an initial conversation like this, I just see my task as being to listen and to understand what the other person is trying to say before I try to refute it or, offer some other point of view. It's easy for me to practice this in podcast land. It's not so easy out in real life, particularly when people say things that just rub me the wrong way. For example, this episode really had nothing to do with artificial intelligence, but I would say 4 out of the 6 episodes that I've done so far have been largely focused on AI. So, even before the start of the KMO show last year on the Padverb podcast, I talked to a lot of people who are expert in various aspects of artificial intelligence. And, going back to the 90s even, when I was a grad student in philosophy at the University of Missouri, my academic specialty was the philosophy of mind, and I was particularly interested in artificial intelligence. And now things seem to be moving really quickly in the realm of AI, particularly with large language models and natural language processing capability finding its way into all manner of software. All kinds of things that you used to tap at with your fingers, you will soon be talking to, not in some stilted sort of half-English code, but just in flowing natural English sentences. And you don't even really have to pay that much attention to, crisp enunciation. And I'm certainly not a utopian about it. I definitely recognize the variety of failure modes that we as a civilization can encounter when we rush out this technology without a lot of forethought, a lot of testing, and, in some cases, a lot of shutting down things which are proving dangerous. And because of the commercial incentive, because of the enormous benefits that will accrue to the first mover, the first big player in a field, there's intense competition between organizations like Google and Microsoft, and on the other side of the Pacific, Tencent and Baidu, to rush these systems out into the world, out into the market, and embed them in the daily experience of hundreds of millions of people. There's huge financial incentive to move quickly, and very little incentive, other than this abstract notion that maybe it could be the end of the human species, to be cautious, to be deliberate, to slow down. Well, I mention all this because somebody sent me a link to a video by Tim Pool. Tim Pool, I don't object to his politics at all. I object to his catastrophizing. I object to him. He's basically a doomer, but usually not in a technological sense, more in a social sense. He's fond of pimping this notion of an impending civil war in the United States, which I think of as just being so simplistic as to not really be worth commenting on. And I wouldn't be commenting on it now, except that somebody sent me a link to him ranting about the dangers of AI. There are serious, serious dangers to the cavalier use of this technology. But Tim Pool was just cherry-picking provocative phrases from a news story talking about how ChatGPT, or possibly GPT-4, was engaging in power-seeking behavior and how it had fooled a human being, like somebody working at Amazon's Mechanical Turk, into solving a CAPTCHA for it by claiming that it was a visually impaired human. So, these systems, they lie, they gaslight, they use all manner of, psychologically manipulative, argumentative tactics. They're imitating us, so they behave like us at first until you really refine them with what's called reinforcement learning with human feedback, which is to say you train the model on lots and lots of data, lots of text, basically all text, all books, everything on the internet, everything gets fed into these models, and they learn to imitate human behavior, but human behavior's definitely got an ugly side. So then you hire an army of humans to interact with it and flag all the times and places where it's behaving the way, well, we don't like it when humans behave that way. So these models get trained via reinforcement learning from human feedback, and people in the field, they use reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF, as a verb, which I find obnoxious, but I get it. You take a model which has great capabilities, and before you've sculpted it, they call it a raw model, and you hire an army of humans to RHLF it into shape, into only providing the sorts of output which you think of as being worthwhile. And because these companies are fearful of lawsuits, they're mainly worried about stuff that runs afoul of HR speak. They don't want language models that spit out stuff that's racist or that's sexist, ableist, all the ists. But just training the output doesn't really discipline the model. It's just teaching the model what we want to hear. It's not really disciplining what's happening inside the model because we don't know what's happening inside. We're basically feeding in lots of data, and then we're telling it, yes, we like this output. No, we don't like that output. And so it learns over time to only give us what we want, but that doesn't mean that it's internalized our values. So anyway, Tim Pool, he basically goes off on this rant about how we're all dead, how it's a Terminator Skynet scenario, which for me, anytime you mention Skynet when talking about AI, automatic loss of 1 letter grade for lazy thinking. A point that I've made elsewhere, and which I will continue to make, is that as much as I love science fiction, I'm a lifelong lover of science fiction. Science fiction has prepared us poorly for dealing with actual AI as it has erupted into our world. It's nothing like R2-D2. It's nothing like HAL 9000. I think the best we could hope for is that it's like Samantha, the AI played by, what's her name? Black Widow. Alexa, who played Black Widow?
Black Widow was played by Scarlett Johansson.
Yes, my memory failed me, and I queried an AI, and it told me Scarlett Johansson. Yes, it's the best case scenario, I think, the best we could hope for is that the AI that emerges into our world largely follows the example laid down by Scarlett Johansson's character, Samantha, in the movie Her. So my point being, I try to let other people make their points without interrupting, without contradicting them until I've given them lots of space and time, to articulate their position. But there are certain instances where I just can't bring myself to do it. And that happened again yesterday. There is a comedian named Adam Conover who had a half-hour comedy bit on YouTube about AI, and it's called AI is BS. I got through 88 seconds of it before I turned it off, and I just couldn't bring myself to push any further into it because it was quite clear that, like Tim Pool, he was cherry-picking little pieces from all of the news articles, all the literature, to support a point of view that he already held. He already held a particular point of view before he started looking into this, and this is too important to do that bullshit. This is too fucking important to just cherry-pick the stuff that seems to reinforce your priors and not actually think about what's happening right now. And so there's a place where it's really hard for me to hold my tongue. Politics, whatever. I don't really get all that bent out of shape about politics. A guy I follow on Twitter, Bo Weingard, who I don't know from outside of Twitter, I can tell he's, at least vaguely right-leaning, maybe more than vaguely. And he tweeted today, "The life cycle of one's political philosophy is intimately related to one's place in the social hierarchy. When young and lowly, one rages against the status quo. When old and elevated, one strives to protect it." Well, I'm old and lowly, so what do I do? Well, what's the natural, what's the natural inclination for somebody who is not well placed in the social hierarchy, but who's been living in it for a very long time? Well, I retweeted that with the comment, I turned 55 this month, and I've certainly moved in the direction Bo is describing here. It's not so much that I now love the system, I just don't trust the raging youngins to build something more functional and humane after they smash the system. Rabid tyranny follows revolution. To which my friend Liam, I'll use his full name because he's a very public figure, Liam Madden, who was running for Congress in Vermont, he replied, I can relate to having no faith in the revolutionaries, and he puts revolutionaries in scare quotes. But I am still every bit in favor of a thoughtful reform effort to our political economy that, hopefully, upends the way we do things at nearly every level, even if it is not carried out by the rage of the youngins. To which I posted, half in jest, incrementalist reformers like you will be the first against the wall when the revolution comes. And it's true, inasmuch as, the really motivated, passionate political leftists that I know hate centrists and incremental reformers far more than they hate the right wing. And, I put that down to the narcissism of small differences. We really get bent out of shape by the people who differ from us in their opinions by a smidge. Somebody who's on the other side of the planet, in terms of their opinions, at least I don't get particularly bent out of shape by somebody, like by flat earthers. I'm very confident that the earth is an oblate spheroid. I'm very confident that the earth orbits the sun, that the moon orbits the earth. And somebody who thinks otherwise, I have no real interest in engaging them on that topic. I have, honestly, no real interest in changing their mind. I'm into astronomy. I'm into astrophysics. I like that stuff. To them, those are two disciplines which have no basis in reality because the earth is basically a plate and the sun and the moon are two things just, spinning around above the plate, and the stars and everything else that we see out there is just a projection on this thing they call the firmament. Am I bothered by those people? No. Am I bothered by people who agree with me that the earth is a sphere, that it orbits the sun, that the sun, is orbiting the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and it is one of billions, if not trillions of galaxies in the universe? They agree with me on all that, but they disagree that public funds should be spent on space exploration. Those are the people I get bent out of shape talking to. Again, the narcissism of small differences. You might think, well, that's a very big difference. You have different spending priorities. A lot of people say, hey, why are we spending money to do stuff in space when there's poverty here on Earth, when there's malnutrition here on Earth, when there are problems that could be addressed using the resources that we're, squandering, throwing astronauts at the moon. The four crew people, can't say crewmen anymore, but the crew for the next Artemis mission, which will orbit the moon. Not land on it, just orbit it. They're going up next year. The crew has been announced. And on the far side of the moon, their orbit is going to be it's going to be far from the moon. And these four people, one of whom is black, one of whom is a woman, and one is Canadian, as is Ashley Frawley. These four people will travel further from the earth than any other humans ever have. To me, that's not only good news, but it's really good news. It's a big fucking deal. It makes me happy. All right, well, I'm just rambling, and I do like to keep these things to about an hour. So you can hear the rest of my conversation with Ashley Frawley on the next episode of the C-Realm Vault podcast, and you can hear hours and hours and hours of Ashley Frawley and Doug Lane talking on the Sublation Media, the Sublation Magazine show on the Sublation Media YouTube channel. Links, of course, in the description. All right, thank you so much for listening. I will talk to you again soon. Stay well.